So that ties into this master plan. This is an opportunity for us to re-envision the future, what our college will look like in the future, and hopefully it will include a lot of welcoming spaces to support learning and discovery for everyone. And so I'd like to hand it off now to the Payette team, Charlie and Tom and Carrie, to tell you about what they've learned so far.
Great. Thank you, CJ. So I'm Charlie Klee. I'm here with Terry and Carrie Drake from my office, Tom and Carrie Drake from my office. And so we want to start today by talking to you very quickly about our practice. We are an architecture firm based out of Boston, specialized in the science and technology market. So we do this kind of work exclusively, and that means that we bring, hopefully, a slightly different perspective than a normal planning team would to the College of Engineering at Berkeley. Importantly, we're a 170-person office based exclusively out of Boston, so we don't have multiple sites. We actually believe in being in one location so strongly that we're on one floor in one room. So we really believe in the open office. Don't worry, we're not going to advocate that for all of you. But our goal today is to talk to you about how to not just breathe new life into the College of Engineering spaces, but do things that speak to that transformative vision that Sujay is talking about. So when we talk about a master plan like this, it's a relatively short burn, about a 6-month study. We're about 2 months into it right now, just the beginning of the discovery process. So we spend a bunch of time just trying to get to know you through meetings, through prowling around the campus, through things like the survey that hopefully you've all participated in. But we gather a lot of information, and then we're going to spend a bunch of time just brainstorming, coming up with ideas, hopefully with input from your folks like yourselves. And then we talk with our cost estimating team, we talk with our engineering group, all about trying to formulate a series of ideas, not just a singular plan, but a series of ideas that can be deployed over time so that whatever we do today doesn't become out of date next week. And that's exactly what happens with these master plans. If we say that it's A, B, C, D, it really needs to be a tree of options that we come up with. At the end of all of this, we're going to come up with a report that will hopefully not sit on the shelf gathering dust, but will be meaningful for you over time. So when we look at the College of Engineering assets, we want to assess them, yes, with the idea of breathing new life into everything, right? It's always with this mindset of kind of renovating comprehensively over time. Obviously, we're not just talking about functional things, about building new offices or painting things. It's about infrastructure. It's about the teaching environments. But we also want to do it strategically in a way that helps us understand how we're going to serve your mission going forward. And so we've started down that path with a series of kind of overarching ideas in place that are hopefully in resonance with the ideas that Sujay just talked about in terms of the mission for the school. So we want to talk about a campus that really celebrates engineering. And right now we see that you've got a lot of classrooms, research labs, offices, everything is sort of kind of closed off and a bit inward looking. But it's not just the rooms, it's actually the buildings. We sort of jokingly say we've never come across a building that was more opaque than Davis. And that can't possibly be the right answer for Berkeley over time. We want to create a collaborative environment. And schools across the country are talking about that, right? So that's not necessarily the most earth-shattering thing. But anything we can do through this master plan to reinforce the identities of the departments, but also get the departments working together, interacting with one another, it's going to be useful. If we can increase the outreach to the rest of the university, that's going to be wonderful as well. There's only so much that a bunch of architects are going to do, but we want to make sure that the architecture doesn't get in your way. And so that's a large part of what this master plan will do. And then thirdly, there's this idea of a heart space for the campus, or for the college. Because right now, you have this disparate group of buildings that are really kind of unrelated to one another. There's very little sense of identity to the engineering precinct. And so if you're a freshman coming to campus, or let's say you just got accepted to the university, and you're arriving here with your parents on Cal Day for the first time, you have no idea where to go. You have no idea where the engineering campus begins and ends. That is not really a great recipe for creating an identity, a home, and hopefully a cohesive whole to the college. Sorry, one of the things I should point out when I look at this, this graphic over here, we've identified the buildings that we see as the College of Engineering occupied buildings. So not all of them are controlled by the College of Engineering. So for example, Stanley's a good one to look at there, where you've got space in there for bioengineering, but it's not controlled by the College of Engineering. Still, from our perspective of just thinking about how these buildings knit together, we want to think about that. We've then sort of color-coded them in secret, that some of them are orange, right? And so the orange ones are ones that we've already started to identify as really more challenged, let's say, in terms of the
Sorry. Yeah.
I think it's also worth pointing out that the team is broader than obviously Payette. We're working with landscape architects, mechanical and building systems engineers, as well as a seismic sort of team at Simpson Gummers and Hager, a structural engineering firm. So we're doing a deep dive into overall quality of buildings and their functionality, as well as all of the qualitative aspects in terms of how they contribute to the overall campus.
Yep. And certainly over this process, we've been talking to a number of different stakeholders. We've been talking to alumni members and board members and the leadership and facilities people, staff. You probably, some of you have sat through some meetings with us. And we also reached out to the entire College of Engineering campus, faculty, staff, and students via a survey, which we believe many of you have participated in.
And so one of the key things about this, yeah, you guys have seen the survey, so you understand the idea that it gave you the ability to give us data that was both qualitative and quantitative. And if you throw it all on one screen, this is what it looks like. Great way to look at data. But fundamentally, we got a lot of information, and it now lets us layer that on top of one another in different ways. Sorry.
I would just go back up and say that the real gold, I think, in terms of the survey was not just the points themselves and being able to compare all of the different response rates, but the comments that underlied your feedback. Many of you placed a green dot and then gave a neutral or slammed the asset in which you were commenting. So I think it was very, very helpful for us to sort of sift through and read through a lot of the comments, because it offered a lot more granularity and specificity on how you feel about the buildings and the place.
And it's a tremendously large data set for a bunch of non-data science scientists. But one of the things that we think of as particularly important is the response rate. And so, the faculty and staff responded at, this kind of 30 to 40% range, which is really unprecedented in our experience. So thank you so much for being that engaged. It's really going to help us hopefully lead to a product that is well tailored to your needs and wants. So that's really great. The student response rate at about 10% is also quite good. So in a survey like this, we might see a survey response rate at 8% and think that was quite good, somewhere in the 8 to 12, maybe even as high as 15%. But 10% is really good when you think of students who might only be here for 4 years, who have a limited kind of long-term vested interest in the college. So we think we got a lot of really good data. At the end of the day, it leads to some things like this. And so you can see Davis is pink because, we love Davis. No, we like to make fun of Davis because it's just such an easy target. But fundamentally, what we did here is we were able to layer the quantitative information that you gave us in terms of green dots and red dots, along with some of the text. So these color codings are not simply a rigorous numerical thing, but it does kind of help us flag attention to things like Echeverry was a lot less popular than we imagined. Walking through it, right? As a bunch of architects, it has some good bones, right? I mean, it's not an ancient building. It's not falling apart. It has some really nice qualities. But the grad students in particular are not very fond of the building because they live in this kind of windowless environment. So yeah, once you hear it, you're not very surprised. But I think it shows the benefit of the survey for opening our eyes to some things that you folks may know quite well. The other thing that's interesting about this is you look at, Hesse, and you might say, well, it's green. The students like it because actually we just renovated some shop space in there, and that's a great thing. But at the same time, we look at this with the filter of the previous master plan. As Sujay mentioned, in 2002, there was a master plan that identified the Hesse O'Brien site as a potential candidate for a future building. That, a lot of these buildings require significant upgrades, mechanical, structural improvements, all sorts of things. And you can either invest in those improvements, or you might look at it and say, don't throw good money after bad. Let's build a new building there. We can build something bigger and make better use of that site. That was a conclusion you reached back in 2002. We actually think it's still pretty sound. And so that idea is almost certain to survive into this master plan update. And so even though it may show up as green here, that doesn't mean it isn't a target for some pretty energetic thinking on our part. Mm-hmm. So other kind of survey information that came up, we asked you guys and the students, where do you think the heart of engineering is? And so if we layer that, we see a tremendous amount of energy on top of Bechtel. And that's not surprising. Those are the student dots. And the students see that as the heart of the campus. And again, when you look at it with a fresh set of eyes, you might say, okay, well, I get that. They're, with their comments, they say things like, it's where all the resources are. It's where my friends are. Okay, I got that. That's a new comment. That wasn't there in the 2002 master plan. Mm-hmm. The college has invested a lot of energy improving Bechtel to try to get to that place. But then at the same time, some people say, well, yeah, I've never thought of engineering as having a heart. Or or somebody else said, we have a broken heart. So
that was with regard to Davis, actually.
Yeah.
But the point being that we're not there just because the students have identified that. What we're really getting through the comments is it's the functional heart for the student experience, but it's not the emotional heart. And so we do think that the college deserves to have that. When some of the faculty talk, they say things about like the West Plaza here, which is this space, outside of Stuttgart Dye, with O'Brien Hesse looking into it. All through here, we see some of those dots. We actually think that has a great potential to be the heart, but it's not there yet. It needs more space that you want to occupy, things that you can plug into, a place where you might sit down and have a meeting with somebody. So it's not just, I grab my sandwich on Bechtel Terrace, eat lunch, and then quickly get back to my office, but a place where you might actually occupy some space and meet with a colleague. We'd love to be able to kind of create that environment. Mm-hmm. We also asked you a little bit about how you move around. And that's a pretty simple question, and we got this graphic, which we think is kind of cool, but doesn't necessarily mean a lot quantitatively, except that we were really intrigued by how uniform some of these pathways are, the north-south passageways. So we knew that a lot of people cross Hearst and come down the east side of Davis, right? That's even a bottleneck, right? Because it gets so skinny as you get down towards Davis. But we were particularly surprised to see how prevalent that Northgate sequence is behind O'Brien and Hesse, and that actually we can't think of that as just a service drive, even though it looks a little bit like that to newcomers. So even something like this that was a relatively simple question helps us really understand something about the campus.
Yeah, and I think the overlap of bicycle and pedestrian paths here in the darkest shade of blue just points to the sort of congestion and the sort of movement on top of each other that these routes have to accommodate. So we were particularly conscious to read through, and we'll be sort of unpacking all the good comments about bicycle safety, pedestrian safety, crossing Hearst. We understand, obviously, this area on Hearst has no bike lanes. Further down the street, there are bike lanes. This area is compressed, and certainly that corner at Gailey is dangerous. We'll be looking at lighting and safety, and you can see here on this slide a lot of the takeaways about, in blue there, regarding nighttime. We have a lot of information now to go on about where to improve lighting, how to make that sort of nighttime experience more comfortable and secure. We received quite a few comments about the crime to the north of Hearst, as well as then sort of comments about safety, ADA access, and so I think this really sort of helps us understand how to make general campus-wide improvements, and also then begin perhaps a dialogue with the city too about making transformations to potentially public way lighting.
It was actually really interesting to see the number of comments about access and addressing problems for people with mobility impairments. So as design professionals, we're pretty sensitive to that. And I would say walking onto campus, you guys have one of the most complex topographies of any college campus we've been on. But seeing that in your own comments was really kind of surprising. You know, it's great news for you folks that you're that focused on it. And I think from our perspective, what we'd really like to do is look at how you get up onto this kind of Plaza West area. Once you're there and you can get into Siddhartha Dai, you know, you can kind of, you know, navigate through elevators and things like that to move around. But just getting to here is incredibly difficult. And so we want to look in the master plan at not just the immediate College of Engineering precinct, but how do we extend out into the greater Berkeley landscape to try to make engineering not just more welcoming to people with mobility impairments, but also just more welcoming in general. So that'll be an underlying theme to what we do. Having collected a bunch of information, not finished our kind of processing of it all because of the large number of data points, but having done kind of the first pass through that, and through our various discussions with you folks, we've zeroed in on what we think are a handful of drivers for the study going forward. At the heart of everything, we want to improve learning environments. You have a lot of classrooms, but the classrooms are not really celebrated through any of the feedback we've gotten from you or from the students. And I think we need to create more classrooms that are really ready for the 21st century. They're not necessarily all windowless environments. You know?
And that's not just classrooms, but think about teaching labs and flexible learning spaces, informal learning spaces, the maker spaces, and those types of things that will really create a robust learning environment for Berkeley moving forward.
And that informal learning space that Carrie mentions is really, I think, one of the key missing ingredients that we are surprised at how little of it you have here. And when we say informal learning environment, what we mean is everything outside of the classroom. So it could be a little space that's right outside of the classroom where you can have a quick impromptu discussion with a student before or after class. It could be the kind of soft space where students gather like Bechtel, where they gather to study into the evening, but having a much broader array of those kinds of spaces and ones that you really want to occupy. Like, how do you find an informal learning space that you want to live in long into the night? Well, it's got to have some amenities and some comfort and a broader variety of accommodations than what you have today in Bechtel. We want to also think about research. It's not just all about the instruction, and we want to think about interdisciplinary research, not just taking all of your research space and bringing it up to current standards, but also making that research super flexible so that as your research evolves, your spaces are ready to the task. We want to think a little bit about core facilities. You have very little of this right now. The clean room in Siddhartha Dai is a great example of a core facility that no individual investigator would be able to fund. But there's other things like the shops or maybe imaging. We talked about a characterization suite. These are high investment spaces that the college probably needs, but you don't necessarily have access to right now. We obviously want to renovate the buildings, but we think that we need to find a way to help you get more windows, more transparency, not just to see into the spaces, but also to get daylight into the spaces, so you want to live in them as well. And then finally, we really want to think about that idea of the heart of the campus. It can't be the sole driver of the master plan, but it could be the thing that helps us unify all the initiatives that we talk about and helps create a brand for the College of Engineering, and the thing that you all will be proud of and your graduates will be proud of.